Introduction. The confession. The room was silent, save for the slow ticking of the old clock hanging above the fireplace. It was late evening, and the shadows creeping across the walls seemed to mirror the weight in Ayan's heart. He sat across from his wife, Zara, his fingers nervously tapping the armrest of the worn leather chair. He had rehearsed this moment in his head 1,000 times, but now that it was here, the words felt heavier than ever. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara looked up from her book, sensing the shift in his tone. "What is it?" Ayan inhaled deeply, gathering the courage he had buried for years. "There's something I've kept from you, something from before we met, but it's been eating away at me. I thought I could live with it, but I can't anymore." He paused, watching her face carefully. There was no anger yet, just curiosity and concern. "It was 10 years ago," he continued. "I was involved in an accident, a hit and run, a child. She ran into the street. I didn't stop. I panicked. I told no one. I wasn't caught." Zara's face froze. The air between them thickened with disbelief. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her silence was louder than any scream. Ayan's eyes welled up. "I've lived with the guilt every day. I see her face in my dreams. I thought if I told you, maybe I'd finally be free." But the words didn't bring freedom. Instead, they unleashed a storm. The confession was not a release. It was a rupture. Zara stood up slowly, backing away from him as if seeing a stranger. The trust they had built over the years began to fracture in an instant. Ayan had expected pain, even anger, but not the hollow, stunned silence that followed. In that moment, Ayan realized something chilling. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it opens a door that can never be closed again. And so, what was meant to bring peace instead ignited the curse. The confession was only the beginning. Initial relief. The illusion of freedom. Ayan sat in the quiet that followed his confession, his chest rising and falling in deep, uneven breaths. For the first time in years, the weight he'd carried silently in his soul seemed to lighten, just a little. The words had finally been spoken. The secret no longer belonged to just him. There was a strange sense of calm, a deceptive peace that settled over him like a warm blanket after a long, cold night. He looked up at Zara, who remained silent but seated. She hadn't stormed out, hadn't screamed, yet. Her expression was unreadable, but she hadn't left. That alone gave him hope. I couldn't keep lying to you," he said quietly. "You deserve the truth, even if it hurts." His voice cracked slightly, but he felt something almost like relief. After years of guilt gnawing at his conscience, the act of confession felt, briefly, like healing. His pulse slowed. For the first time in a long while, he could look someone in the eye and not feel like a fraud. He poured himself a glass of water, his hands still trembling slightly, and leaned back against the wall. For a flicker of a moment, he even imagined a future where they would talk through this, understand it, move past it. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe the worst part was over. Zara finally spoke, her voice soft and distant. "I need a minute." She got up and walked out of the room, leaving her book behind on the coffee table. The door clicked shut behind her. Ayan stood frozen, unsure if he should follow or give her space. Still, even as worry crept into the corners of his mind, the hollow space left by guilt had been filled with something new, honesty. He convinced himself it was the right decision. People said the truth was painful but necessary, that real love could survive anything if it was built on truth. And for that fleeting moment, Ayan believed it. He believed that the confession was the hardest part, that once it was out, everything else would be manageable. But he didn't yet know that the real consequences had only just begun. The relief was real, but temporary. The curse had only started to stir. Unintended consequences. The crumbling facade days passed, but the silence between Ayan and Zara grew heavier, more hostile with each hour. The confession, which had seemed like a release, had in fact detonated something deeper, something neither of them fully understood. Zara avoided eye contact, her responses clipped, her presence in the house reduced to mechanical movements. The warmth in her voice had vanished. The comfort in their home had turned cold. Ayan noticed the subtle changes first, the absence of her evening greetings, the untouched meals she once lovingly prepared, the late-night phone calls whispered behind closed doors. They still shared a roof, but the emotional distance between them had become a chasm. Every effort he made to talk was met with stiff silence or averted gazes. Then came the ripples. Zara confided in her sister. Her sister told their mother, and soon Ayan felt the shift in how others looked at him, suspicion in their eyes, discomfort in their voices. Invitations stopped. Neighbors who once waved now avoided eye contact. The weight he thought he had unburdened now returned, twice as heavy and carried by others. At work, he caught whispers behind closed doors. Someone had overheard Zara at a cafe. The rumors spread like oil on water. No one said anything directly, but the glances lingered too long. Conversations fell quiet when he entered the room. His team began bypassing him for meetings. Trust, once earned, was evaporating. He hadn't anticipated this. He had prepared for Zara's anger, maybe even heartbreak, but not isolation, not judgment from strangers, not the quiet unraveling of everything he'd spent years building. And Zara, she was no longer the same. She had always been strong, but now she was distant, almost hollow. He saw it in her eyes. The man she thought she knew was gone, replaced by someone who had hidden something unforgivable. One evening, she said flatly, "You didn't just kill a child that day, Ayan. You killed our future, too." Those words struck harder than any punishment the law could have given. Ayan sat alone that night, staring at the wall, finally understanding that confessions don't always cleanse the soul. Sometimes they stain everything they touch, and this stain was spreading fast. Social backlash, branded by the truth. It didn't take long for Ayan to feel the full weight of judgment beyond the walls of his home. What began as whispers in hushed corners soon became cold shoulders, unanswered calls, and awkward encounters. The people he once laughed with now only offered forced smiles, or none at all. The confession had spread beyond his control, morphing into a story with a life of its own. Friends who once filled his weekends with invitations now grew scarce. Even those who hadn't heard the full truth treated him with a cautious, uneasy politeness. The few who did know, those Zara had confided in, or those who had pieced it together, kept their distance. To them, Ayan wasn't just a man who had made a mistake. He was a criminal in disguise, a coward hiding behind the mask of normalcy for a decade. He noticed it at the grocery store, the shopkeeper's usual warmth reduced to a tight nod. At the mosque, old friends avoided standing beside him during prayer. At family gatherings, conversations shifted when he entered the room. His own cousins, who once respected him, barely acknowledged his presence. His parents, too, were shaken when they found out his father couldn't even look at him. "This is shame," he said quietly, staring into the distance. "You didn't just disgrace yourself, you've stained our name." Ayan tried to defend himself, to explain that he was young, scared, and that confessing now had taken courage. But no one cared about courage. They cared about consequences. And society wasn't interested in redemption. It wanted someone to blame, someone to shame. Zara's family demanded she leave him. Her mother cried on the phone, accusing Ayan of endangering her daughter's future. Her father didn't speak at all. When Zara began staying with her sister more often, it became clear Ayan was no longer part of the world he once belonged to. In public, he wore guilt like a second skin. In private, he felt stripped of every identity he had once held: husband, friend, son, respected professional. Now, he was something else. Not a murderer in the eyes of the law, but in the court of society, he was worse. He was unforgiven, and with every passing day, the line between justice and vengeance blurred a little more. Mental turmoil, drowning in regret. Ayan had once believed guilt was a steady companion, an ache that came and went with the passing years. But after the confession, guilt transformed into something else entirely, a storm without mercy, a presence that followed him into every room, every silence, every breath. Nights became unbearable. He would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open, his mind looping over every moment of the past. The girl's face, blurred by time but sharpened by guilt, visited him in dreams. Sometimes she screamed. Other times she simply stood on the roadside staring, silent, accusing. During the day, Ayan tried to function, tried to appear normal, but the mask was cracking. The judgment from others was one thing, the punishment within was far worse. His heart raced constantly, even during mundane tasks. A door closing too loudly made him flinch. Every unfamiliar number on his phone sparked a fresh wave of panic. His appetite vanished. So did his motivation. The world became colorless, muffled by the weight pressing on his chest. He no longer cared about deadlines, meetings, or promotions. His thoughts were consumed by what-ifs. What if he had stayed at the scene that night? What if he had turned himself in? Would he be in prison now, but at least at peace? Instead, he was a prisoner of his own mind. He scribbled in a journal late at night, filling pages with apologies no one would ever read. He avoided mirrors. He hated the man who looked back. Zara's silence, his family's disappointment, society's disgust, all of it echoed what he already believed about himself, that he was unforgivable. He tried therapy once, sat on a worn-out couch across from a kind-eyed stranger who asked him to describe what he felt. But when the words came out, "I killed someone and kept it secret for 10 years," the air grew heavy, and even the therapist's gentle nod couldn't undo the shame. The spiral deepened. What began as guilt morphed into regret. Regret gave way to fear. Fear bred anxiety, and anxiety clung to him like a second skin, tight, suffocating, and always present. Ayan had hoped confession would bring clarity. Instead, it had opened a door to a darker room inside himself, one where guilt echoed louder than forgiveness ever could. Turning loved ones against them. Love turned to ash. Ayan had once believed that no matter how bad things got, the people closest to him, those who truly knew him, would stand by his side. He had underestimated how deep betrayal could cut. As the days wore on, the circle around him, once full of warmth and loyalty, began to collapse. Zara, the person he had trusted most, had become a stranger. The gentle affection in her touch had been replaced with guarded silence. She moved through the house like a ghost, present, but unreachable. Sometimes she stared at him as if searching for the man she married, and finding only a stranger with blood on his hands. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she said one morning, her voice devoid of emotion. "How could you hide something like that and still look me in the eye every day?" He tried to respond, but what could he say? That he was afraid? That he thought it was behind him? His reasons sounded like excuses now. Zara didn't want reasons. She wanted the man she married back. But that man no longer existed. Even his closest friend, Farhan, had turned cold. Ayan had confided in him after the confession, hoping for understanding, maybe even forgiveness. Instead, Farhan recoiled. "You should have gone to the police back then," he said bitterly. "You didn't just lie to Zara. You lied to all of us." The message was clear. Support had its limits. His mother, who once defended him fiercely in every argument, now spoke in measured tones, as if walking on emotional glass. His younger sister stopped bringing her children to visit. "They're too young to understand," she said. But Ayan heard the truth beneath the excuse. She no longer trusted him around them. Love, he realized, is fragile in the face of truth. Where there was once compassion, there was now distance. Where there had been loyalty, there was now doubt. And every moment spent with these people was a reminder of what he had lost. Not just their presence, but their faith in who he was. He wasn't just a man with a past anymore. He was a man redefined by it. And in revealing the truth, He hadn't only destroyed their trust, he had destroyed the version of himself that they had once loved. Attempts to make amends, atonement, or accusation. Haunted by the wreckage of his confession, Ayan couldn't sit still in his own guilt any longer. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but perhaps he thought he could soften the present, fix something, anything. He wasn't seeking forgiveness anymore. He had accepted that it might never come. What he sought now was purpose, some way to make right what he had left wrong for too long. The first step was finding the girl's family. It took weeks. The accident had happened in another city long ago and had been buried by time and silence. But Ayan persisted. Through a former journalist friend, he tracked down a small article from a decade ago. A brief mention of a child struck in a hit-and-run, the driver never found. The name of the family was there, Husna, age 7. Her father's name was Imran. When Ayan finally stood at the door of their modest home, a trembling apology prepared, he wasn't greeted with grace. Imran's face hardened the moment he heard who Ayan was. "You don't get to come here now," the man growled, his voice breaking with pain. "You took our daughter. You took 10 years of peace. And now you want to bring us what? Closure?" Ayan tried to speak, to explain, to offer something, money, support, anything, but every word tasted hollow. Imran slammed the door before he could finish. He wrote letters, dozens, to Zara, to her family, to his own parents, even to Farhan. Most went unanswered, some were returned. One reply came from Zara, a single line, "You're not fixing this, Ayan. You're only reopening the wounds." He volunteered at a child safety organization, donated anonymously to road safety initiatives, gave talks to students about responsibility and regret. But no one knew his story, and those who did saw his efforts not as atonement, but performance. Every attempt to make amends was met with suspicion. It wasn't humility they saw in him, it was desperation. He had waited too long. The timing, the trust, the opportunity to make things right, they were gone. Now, all his actions felt like trying to patch a sinking ship with paper. Sometimes, trying to fix the past only reminds people of how much it still hurts. And in trying to heal others, Ayan only deepened his own wounds. A darker secret emerges. Beneath the surface. Ayan thought he had unearthed the worst of his past. What he didn't realize was that in confessing, he had only begun to tug at a thread, one that led to a far darker truth buried beneath memory and guilt. It began with a letter, a plain white envelope, slipped under his door with no return address. Inside, a single line written in shaky handwriting. "You weren't alone that night." A cold wave washed over him. His mind reeled. He had spent years replaying that night, the sudden flash of movement, the sickening thud, the panic, the decision to drive away. But now he questioned everything. Was someone else there? Had someone seen? Or worse, had someone helped cover it up? Digging through old phone records, journals, and scraps of memory, Ayan traced his steps. He remembered he had been drinking, heavily. He remembered calling someone for help. A friend. Not Farhan, not Zara, someone else. Then he remembered. Samir. Samir had been with him after the accident. Ayan had called him in a frenzy, babbling about what happened. Samir arrived, panicked but sharp, and told him what to do. Leave the car, wipe it down, report it stolen. "You were drunk," he had said. "If you come forward now, your life is over." Samir had handled everything, the car, the alibi, the silence. Ayan hadn't wanted to remember it that way. His guilt had painted him as the sole villain. But now the truth came crashing down. He hadn't just hidden the crime. He'd let Samir carry part of the burden too. And Samir had used that burden as leverage, because now Samir was calling. "You better shut this down, Ayan," his voice hissed over the phone. "You confess anymore and you drag me down with you. I have a career, a family. You want to ruin more lives?" Ayan was stunned. The man he thought had helped him in desperation had done more than cover for him. He had manipulated him into silence for years. And now, with the truth surfacing, Samir would do anything to protect himself. What began as a confession of guilt had become a revelation of conspiracy. Ayan was no longer battling only his past. Now he was up against a living secret, one with a voice, a threat, and far more to lose. And this time telling the truth could cost even more than silence ever had. Isolation and breakdown. The edge of the abyss. Ayan no longer recognized the man in the mirror. His once bright eyes were hollow, ringed with exhaustion. His shoulders hunched under invisible weight. The world around him had fallen away. Friends, family, even his shadow of a marriage, leaving behind a silence so deep it rang in his ears. He had no one to speak to, and nowhere to go. The house, once filled with Zara's laughter and late-night conversations, now felt like a tomb. Dust gathered on forgotten picture frames, mail piled up at the door. His phone remained still, no missed calls, no new messages. Even the notifications had given up. Zara had moved out completely. His parents, shamed and exhausted, had stopped answering his calls. Farhan had changed his number. His therapist had dropped him after missed appointments and non-responsive emails. The walls closed in. The windows no longer brought light, only reflections of regret. Ayan tried to distract himself. He cleaned, then let the mess build again. He read, then abandoned books halfway through. He started writing a letter to the girl's family again, then tore it to shreds. Nothing helped. Nothing softened the ache or silenced the endless loop in his mind. Was it worth it? Was the confession meant to free him? If so, why did it feel like a prison? He sat on the floor of the living room one evening, clutching a photo of Zara from better days. Tears rolled down his cheeks without warning. He cried not just for her, or the girl, or the broken pieces of his life, but for the version of himself that believed truth would heal. His breathing turned shallow. His hands shook. Maybe I was meant to carry it to my grave, he thought. Rock bottom wasn't a moment. It was a stretch of days where life lost meaning, and hope felt like a cruel joke. Where every passing car sounded like the one that might stop and end it all. Where every night he slept on the couch he hoped he wouldn't wake up. And yet, he did. Every morning, he woke. Alone. Regretful. Angry. Empty. The truth hadn't saved him. It had stripped him bare. And now, at the end of everything, Ayan sat in the ashes of his old life, questioning the very act he once believed was redemption. The final lesson, the weight of truth. Ayan now lived in the quiet aftermath of his confession, not free, not punished, but suspended in the gray space between the two. The world had moved on without him. The people in it had resumed their lives, reshaped by his truth, but no longer revolving around it. Only he remained tethered to the moment he opened his mouth and let the past out like a flood. He sat alone most days, in a modest apartment miles away from his old life. The city skyline outside his window was unfamiliar, and the silence inside the walls was something he had grown used to. He spoke little, ate less, and worked a job far beneath his old career, manual, silent, unremarkable. It suited him. No longer did he seek redemption. He had learned that some wounds don't close with apologies, and not all wrongs can be balanced by confession. The truth he discovered wasn't a key, it was a blade. It didn't unlock peace. It cut through every relationship, severing ties, bleeding trust, and reshaping his identity entirely. Sometimes he wondered, had he done the right thing? Was it braver to confess, or to carry it forever in silence, protecting others from the fallout? His heart still didn't know. One day, he received a letter, handwritten, no return address. It read, "We can't forgive you, but we see what it cost you. Maybe that's something." Signed only, Husna's mother. He folded the letter with trembling hands, placed it carefully in a drawer, and stared out the window for a long time. That day, he didn't feel peace, but he did feel stillness. Maybe, he thought, truth isn't always about being forgiven. Maybe it's about choosing to carry the burden openly, no matter the weight. His story wasn't one of triumph. It wasn't clean or redemptive, but it was real. And in its honesty, there was a strange kind of strength. Because in the end, Ayan had learned a final painful truth. Not all confessions bring freedom. Some bring fire, some bring silence, and some leave scars so deep you carry them not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that truth matters, even when it costs everything.